everyone for coming, including the artists. It's been a really fun, cool experience. You guys all know who I am, so I'm not going to tell you who I am. But I will share with you that this show is like a year in the making. Started talking about it last fall. I thought it would be really great to have a show that was focused on abstraction and to do it with artists that are in the building. The conversation initially started with our two Michaels, Petow and Stearns. Being an interesting interplay. I have a color relationship with Mr. Stearns here, and always really fascinated with what Michael Petow is doing in his studio. So the idea was started a year ago, but the opportunity was not. So, finding the time and space to make that happen evolved, and we finally, there was a window that started opening, I think beginning of the summer, I'm going to say, or spring. And so we were given the time slot, and then the group grew. Like, okay, so we have a green light to put this together, so let's pull a bigger group in. And it was an organic process. I work very organically as a curator. I went to school for fine art, for studio art, not for curation. So curation is a very creative process for me. So when I'm thinking about a show, I think about the relationship of the work of each artist next to each other and across from each other, and how that whole group forms a voice, like an orchestra or a chorus or a group show. So why abstraction? Okay, it's kind of, some of this is, I wanted to talk about because, abstraction is the most popular, like hands down the most popular form or theme of artwork in the world. But with that, it actually, because it's so popular, gets taken for granted, and people make assumptions or their perspectives are, it's very easy to think within your own bubble, right? So I thought it'd be nice to just talk about it from each person's perspective. I love abstraction because of its universality and its endless diversity. The permutations and interpretations of abstraction are just endless. And if you really think about it, every form of artwork is actually abstraction, because even the most hyper-realist painter or photographer is still taking something that exists in the third dimension, and then abstracting it onto a plane or a sculpture or whatever their medium is. So that's what has always attracted me to it. So next, I guess I like to ask each artist to introduce themselves, give a little background of whatever you like to talk about, like your life background or your art practice. And start with Miguel.
Sure, love to. My name is Miguel Aguilar. I'm an abstract painter. A lot of my background goes from drawing a lot of cartooning, but since then I've really enjoyed painting abstract, very minimalist, have an emphasis on catharsis in the process, rather than the result. And yeah, that's all I got for right now.
I'm Marc, Raphael. I'm also an abstract expressionist painter. As a kid, I loved art, and I remember in elementary school loving the finger painting and the easel painting and the ceramics. Loved all that. Even coloring books with crayons. Sometimes coloring inside the line, sometimes coloring outside the line. Then I lost track of all that as I grew up. I got much more interested in girls and sports, and then the art took a back seat. And it wasn't until after I graduated from college that I started even thinking about art again. And then I saw Jackson Pollock's work in person. And there was just something about that man's work that struck me. It was the power, the energy of it. And I think because of sports and all that physicality that's expressed through the body, that I saw, ooh, you know, I'm no longer doing the sports thing. I still have this energy inside of me. How the hell do I express that? And I felt like, I think this might be the thing for me to do. And I tried it, actually fell in love with it. And that whole process, my process is very similar to Pollock's, where I lay the canvas flat on the ground, I move around the exterior, and it's all that leaning and moving and gestural making in the air came very natural to me, and I think it's because of the sports background. And I fell in love with it from that point on.
Oh, there's a different building.
And you have to make a living. So it was strictly a hobby, not even a hobby at one point. I just tried it and liked it. Had a full-time career as a classroom teacher and painted when I could. And then in 2019, I stopped teaching full-time and devoted myself full-time to the teaching. And that's when I really, to the art. And that's when I really got into it and really immersed myself in my practice and my technique and refined it over time to produce the art that you see here today. And it's still how I primarily express myself. It's through my art.
Hi, I'm Michael Stearns. I started drawing as most of us do, like everybody else, you know, with Crayolas and pencils and drawing, you know, things that you normally see around you in a very realistic kind of fashion. I'm a multimedia artist. I guess that's probably the best way to describe what I do. I love 3D work. I love painting. I love combining materials. Example of 3D work is the Valkyrie over your head, the sculptures in the room. The 3D work on the walls is also kind of very painterly in its own way. I started taking painting lessons. My folks were very creative and gave me an opportunity to start painting when I was like 9. I was taking lessons, watercolor lessons, from a lady that seemed ancient to me. She was probably 45 or 50 at the time. I lived in eastern San Diego area, and she lived in Balboa Park, and I'd ride the bus every Saturday down, and we'd spend all day Saturday in the park and in her house painting. And I decided then that that's probably what I was going to do. You know, it wasn't really a conscious thought. And I was, you know, so all through high school, college, I was an arts major. I came from that school of the 50s and 60s, and the San Francisco school and the New York school. So most of my work was pretty abstract back in those days. I was fortunate enough to watch some of the guys from the Chicano School of Painting who were in my classes, and I didn't know it at the time. You know, they were just guys who were just incredible with color. And being born and I think raised in Southern California and going across the border and being connected to the Latin community just through visually as much as everything else, I think that's where I developed my love of color and the intense colors that you find in their kind of artwork and especially the paper mache stuff. I love working with paper mache and those kinds of things. And I also got really interested. I read Jacques Cousteau's book and decided I wanted to be a marine biologist. So I went off on that tangent for a while until we got to organic chemistry and you know, complex mathematics, because back then it was all about ratios, and it was like, I think I want to be a potter or a painter. So I went back I went to LA State, so I went to school with those guys in that era and that time. And there was a lot of, just a lot of action going on. It was just an incredible time to be involved in the arts. But like Marc, I met a young woman and we fell in love and we made a baby, and it was like, maybe I need a real work. So I got involved in that, and I was on a school deferment and for military deferment, and as soon as I had to go look for work, they activated me, so I got to ride an aircraft carrier for a couple of years around in South China Sea, which is as close as I got to Vietnam, which was very nice from that point of view. Got into the corporate world, became a firefighter, then went into the corporate world. But the voices didn't ever go away. You know, they never do. And you know, sometimes making a good pot of chili isn't the same as making a good painting. Close. It's close. But not quite the same. For my 60th birthday, I've been talking about doing it, and my wife said to me, you know, it's time to put up or shut up. So she had everybody bring me art gift certificates for my 60th birthday. And I thought, okay, here we go. Life was good. I was making a good living corporately. And I thought, I'll just go rent a space, and if I can do it for a year, if I can actively go to a space and paint for a year, we'll see where this takes me. And I heard somewhere that, you know, that a writer, I think, said, you know, if you should put 2 hours a day at least into your love, into your work. And so I thought, well, if I just go look at art magazines, I'm doing, which I'm doing something, which is true, I think. Still think that's true. So I did this for a year, and I really liked the idea of having a space away from my house, away from where I lived. I could go there, walk in, open the door, do what I needed to do. And when the time came for me to leave, I could close that door, walk out, and it was my world. And you know, it's kind of the ultimate man cave or woman cave. It doesn't make any difference really. It becomes your space. It's where you can be what you want to be, and you can create your absolutely most fantastical world that you could possibly think of, and actually have something there to look at afterwards. And I become pretty organic about everything I do. I have another practice that I do is involving spirituality and dealing with those kinds of things, and I've tried to bring the two of those together. And I think in some cases it really works. Sometimes it misses, but the challenge is to get up and try it again.
Wow, how am I supposed to follow that?
Mr. Stearns, everybody.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, he's an inspiration to us all, for sure. I had similar types of very winding roads in my life. I was born in Korea, and I actually, when I had this like awakening moment when I was 5 years old, and I was in kindergarten, and we had this like, we were having World Cultures Week, and I remember the teacher was up front, and she was showing us these pictures of like famous places all around the world. And she got to Paris, this picture of the Eiffel Tower, and she said, Paris is in France, in Europe, and this is where all the artists and philosophers and writers of the world go. And they think about the world's problems, and I swear she said they drink coffee and whatever, and they philosophize, and they make art, and they make, you know, poetry, and all these things. And I distinctly remember my eyes just going like, that is where I need to go. This is what I need to become. And it's a childhood memory, and you think like it'll pass, but it just stuck with me. It stuck with me always through. And Then my family moved to the States. I grew up in the Midwest. I've lived in many different places, and but that dream kind of always stayed. And I also had a couple decades in the corporate world because of necessity, because I was living in New York City and wasn't going to be able to survive on minimum wage. So went into the corporate world. Thankfully, I was able to actually at least work in the art world or in creative fields. I felt very fortunate that way. But I had to put my my creative practice aside, and it literally was like it was like I was giving my child away, like up for adoption or something. I'm like had a mini ceremony where I put my paints away and I said, I'll come back for you one day. Yeah, seriously. But and there were moments where I wasn't sure that it was going to come back, and especially those hard days in the office or whatever, that like hating your job and like, what did I do this? Did I like burn my soul? But thankfully, I've been able to come back to it, and I'm super grateful to have found this studio a few years ago and this community. And then now I've readopted my child, and we're growing our relationship, and I'm exploring all sorts of mediums, the colors coming back to me, and in this whole new form, which is really exciting, and I'm exploring new mediums, and about to start doing performance art again, which I haven't done in decades. So super exciting. And yeah, that's where I'm at. Cool.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Bedal. I'm a choreographer, a media artist, and a human-computer interaction designer. And a lot of my work centers around this idea of how computers perceive human movement. And my background is formally in dance and choreography. I spent many years, as a 3-year-old doing tap ballet and tumbling, and kind of grew my choreography and dance practice over the years, and studied dance and choreography in college. But then I transitioned into the tech industry, where I learned kind of the practice of interaction design and ended up designing some of the core technology that people use in products every day. I spend a lot of time specializing in gestural interfaces, so ways that we move our body, like waving our hand or walking up to a device. All of those interactions I worked on to help us kind of have a new set of choreography we use with computers today. So I spent a while in the gestural interface land. I now work in artificial intelligence on like real-time AI systems that understand physical spaces and people. So very much immersed in the corporate tech world, but similar sentiment to others in this group. I think having that art outlet is super important as a way to kind of like honor your own artistic agenda and your own vision. So I'm very grateful to have this space, and my media art practice right now is really an outlet to fuse together my knowledge of technology with my passion for movement and choreography, and to kind of explore conceptual and aesthetic things that I just don't have the time and space to, kind of in the codified corporate world. So yeah, my media art practice uses a lot of motion capture, computer vision techniques, AI models, AI tools to really explore this question of how computers perceive movement.
Hi, I'm Hipp. I'm a sort of nomadic artist, a photographer, director. My version of the corporate world was commercial photography and lighting directing for Hollywood and photographers all around the world. So I did that for 20-something years. I've really never been able to do anything but art. I wasn't very good at school. I don't work well with others or take direction from authority or any of those things that you need to do in a corporate structure. So I've only ever been able to really do some sort of artistic practice. Thankfully, I was able to find the commercial photographic and entertainment world and was pretty good at lighting for a while. So that was sort of my version. It paid bills for a long time. I also taught for a while. I taught at the Art Institute of Boston and then Lesley University and then Santa Monica College. And was fortunate enough to sort of always keep an artistic practice going, even though, you know, I was often in charge of making other people's work look better, which was really inspiring, and I got to meet some of literally the world's best artists. I've worked for just, you know, worldwide renowned photographers and directors and some pretty amazing people, including somebody in the room. Anyway. So anyway, I was able to sort of maybe 7 years ago, sort of full-time direct myself back to my own work, and I've been doing that since, you know, with varied degrees of success. But I've shot for Gatorade and Amazon, and I have lots of corporate clients that I'd rather not mention. But you know, that's made a living. But I've also been showing and you know, engaging in the art world as much as possible, and you know, in both New York and here. And my wife and I tend to. I started by saying I'm nomadic, and we have a place back east and a place here, and we have a van, and we drive back and forth a lot, and we live on a boat some of the time, and so we're kind of always exploring place and people, and I think that drives my work more than anything else. And the last thing I'll just say to follow up with, Sung-Hee asked me to sort of participate in this, and I never really consider myself an abstract artist, but I think that the wonderful thing about abstraction, and to her point about it being universal, as a photographer, form is all I ever care about. I mean, form and light, that's what photography is. And the composition and form is what abstraction sort of is the most distilled version of. I mean, that's what you have left to communicate is shape, form, color, you know, just that. So I've always been extremely drawn to it. All my favorite artists seem to be abstract painters in some ways, which, you know, as a photographer, people are confused by sometimes, but I think that that's actually the best inspiration is look outside your own medium as much as possible. Anyway, that's all.
I'm Michael Petow. I do symbolic painting through abstraction. I started as a graffiti artist when I was 8 years old, and then spent about 15, 20 years running around LA doing whatever. I got busted really bad for tagging on the Church of Scientology, and anyways, I caught a hate crime and I couldn't work, and so I had to figure out like what I was going to do. And I had some friends that were, you know, pretty big in the art world that were kind of trying to encourage me to like make stuff and like do things like that. But I didn't really want to be an artist. I just wanted to do graffiti. And then I got into tattooing and did an apprenticeship. And then drugs and alcohol kind of like blew that whole situation up, and was kind of just homeless and trying to figure things out. And my ex-girlfriend took me in after I'd gotten out of a mental institution and basically told me like, yo, you have to do something. You can't just do nothing. And so I started painting, and then I painted, and like after a few months people started buying it, and I was like, just kept painting, and I was like, okay, like how am I gonna like figure out like how to make this, because I couldn't work, I couldn't do anything really. And so I got an iPad to like help with the process of painting, and then I taught myself how to use the iPad really well, and all of a sudden this opportunity came out of the sky. And I got a contract for like 40 restaurants for the Calaveras chain over here, and then that's how I ended up here.
Right. Cool. So I wanted to talk about just a few kind of running themes or connecting themes. Three of them. One is, first is abstract expressionism and street art, and we kind of identified or asked two artists for each subject, but everyone is absolutely welcome to chime in and join the discussion, and you as well, like absolutely would love a lively discussion. So the first is abstract expressionism in street art, the second is spiritualism in art, and the third is technology in art. So first, ABEX and street art, I'd love to address that with Marc and Miguel. Yeah, like
Miguel.
how you got into it, what drew you to the style and form of work that you work in, or how maybe it was something different, but I don't know.
No, yeah, totally. I always kind of like laugh about it because I did not think that I'd be doing like this type of work where it's just like line work, where it's just very monochromatic, or I don't know, very minimalist. I feel like we touched on it. I used to do a lot of cartooning, a lot of comics, a lot of like I did a little bit of graffiti, but it was just mostly just like character work. Like I did a lot of weed pasting and just like little characters. And it was never good at piecing or doing throwaways or things like that. So then I just kind of just stuck to that. And then when I got the studio, I was just, the first mark on a painting is always the hardest because you don't want to mess up. You're like, oh, what do I do? And I would just spend so much time hesitating. And then when I finally did, I'm just gonna do a line. And then the line just continued. And I realized, that felt actually really nice. So I'm just gonna keep doing stuff like that. And I realized what I really enjoy about it is just my headspace when I'm actually doing the lines and stuff. Out of context, that line sounds funny. What's it called? But no, it relates to street art because I feel like a lot of street art is just very subjective, and I've never really seen. I feel like now in street art, there's a lot more abstraction in it. Like it could not just be words. It could just be like a weed paste on an electrical box, or it could be something on a street lamppost. Sorry, my words aren't coming. But I think that's just my relationship with it. Like I never thought I would be an abstract painter. I just thought I was just gonna draw cartoons for the rest of my life. And then it's just kind of funny how like art just finds you, or like, oh wow, I'm doing this, or like, oh wow, this is actually a style. It's kind of cool. And then when I work in the museum field, and so there's a lot of people like, oh, have you seen this person's work? It's very reminiscent of this, and I always thought like, so I'm not the first person. Okay, that's cool. Your stuff is derivative. But no, so it's just cool to see different artists kind of like but like paint a similar style. It kind of goes to show that like no thought is original, but also there are other people like you thinking the same way, and you find that by like, oh yeah, there's an artist that looks just like that, or have you heard of this artist? You really like this artist, and yeah, it's opened up a whole new world of it. Yeah, I never thought I'd be an abstract painter, but also I'm bad at subjective drawing, so it's just easier just to draw. Oh yeah, it's abstract. It's cool.
Yeah.
But that's where my head's at.
You paired abstract expressionism with street art or graffiti?
Street art.
Yeah. I never really thought of the two together. So it's the first time I'm really thinking about it. And what comes to mind immediately, and by the way, mine are the three abstract expressionist paintings behind you all. There's an immediacy to graffiti art. Right? You got to do your art and get out of there before they find you, right? Before you get caught. It's also, as Miguel said, very subjective. It's very technical, but it's also very emotional and subjective at the same time. That's totally true for abstract expressionism. If you think of the Pollocks of the world in the 40s and 50s. For me, it's very process oriented. And my work is also done quickly. And for me, it's done quickly because I want to get out of this. My mind's been messing me up for years. My mind gets in my way. I think that's one of the things I loved about sports. Yeah, sure, you have to be mindful of what you're doing in the moment, but everything in sports is very quick. It's very spontaneous. You spend all those hours practicing, getting the technique down. So when you're in the game and there's a moment, everything just fires at the same time, and the creativity comes in. It's the same for me with the abstract expressionism. I work in short bursts. It's how am I feeling at that moment? What's that gesture I need to make? what do I have to do at this moment to continue to make this painting come alive and have everything work together? And I could work for 5 minutes, and then I have to push that painting aside. Oh, I pulled the next one in front of me. Depending on where I am with that painting, I could take 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. And you know, within a week or 2 weeks, the whole painting is done. But there's that immediacy that for me gets me in touch with what's going on inside of me. And it's therapeutic, it's revealing, and you know, Harold Rosenberg was one of these guys from the abstract expressionist movement that was one. There was Harold Rosenberg and there was Clement Greenberg. These are the two guys that are doing all the writing about abstract expressionism. And Greenberg said that, you know, the canvas is that arena where the abstract artist expresses himself. And it's like that for me. A lot of the world didn't make sense to me. When I was in the basketball court made sense to me. If I was on the baseball diamond made sense to me. When I'm painting on my canvas, the canvas makes sense to me. That's my world. And as small as it is, there is something very satisfying about making all these split-second decisions in a short period of time. The color choice, the gesture choice, and just watching it all come together, all these pieces and parts coming together. And when you're done, and it works, they don't all work, by the way. There's plenty of paintings that no one will ever see. But those that do, it's because everything was clicked, and I think it's because I'm getting out of my own way. Everything's connected inside of me, and there's this authentic energy just that's allowed to flow and express itself to produce the paintings that you see in here. And this was the first time I really thought about how it is connected to street art in a way.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, like you said, the immediacy and the action, that relationship to like your full body and action in like street art is also immediate. But the relationship to sports also, like I've always felt, or athletics or physicality. Let's say physicality. I have that same feeling of simpatico and understanding that relationship because I grew up playing a lot of sports as well, and then I still do all sorts of things from yoga to cycling to swimming and whatnot. But both of you have talked about when you're creating and how it puts you into another state, right? Like it's whether it's meditative or a focused, but there's skill involved with that. This set of skills and movements that you have created, each of you have created for yourself, right? The movements that need to be made in order to make these bold, curvilinear, or straight lines, or the gestures that are needed to make these consistent and varying splattering patterns, right? There's skill and emotions that are involved with that. And like now I'm saying this, and I'm sitting next to Laura, who is like, she specializes in that and relating it to computation, and technology, which is so fascinating. Same for me when I create. I've been telling like my yoga community actually about this, how I feel like the state of mind that I'm in and the physicality that I'm in when I'm making art or practicing yoga or playing pool, they're like on the same vibration for me because there's a certain amount of concentration and focus that I use when I do all of those activities. And that level of focus and attention creates this vibration that is somehow, it's like this fusion of energetic and also calming at the same time, right? Like, and you're in that state, and then that's your groove, right? Groove state or something. But
So thanks for pairing us.
my pleasure. Okay, next is is spiritualism in art, and we've got the two Michaels, Michael Stearns and Michael Petow. Could you guys also, like, I know most of you are familiar with the show, some of you are not, but so Michael Stearns' work are the mixed media sculptural pieces that are in this space, the Valkyrie that's above your heads, the two mixed media wall pieces, the colorful works behind you, the freestanding sculptural pieces, including this, the ladder to nowhere. Those are Michael Stearns' pieces, and it's only a small segment of his entire portfolio and the type of work.
Very small. Very small. This man has a lot of work.
And then Michael Petow has the installation in the other room, the large installation that's got 3 large paintings, but then he's also incorporated sculptural pieces. If you guys can talk to us, share with us what these works are about, that'd be great.
Me or you,
Let's see. So these works in particular, or just like the art in general?
I would love to hear about the whole installation.
Okay. So like I do like symbolic painting, and at first, for a long time, I was having these like really crazy dreams, and I didn't know what to do about it, and like they were starting to come true, and it got really weird. So I went to a Jungian dream analysis, and we started exploring my dreams, and that's when I started like looking at my internal images and like what was going on like internally with me, and starting to try to like paint that and express that and use those images as starting points. And one thing I learned from graffiti when I was really young is like I'd be in the car when we were driving on the freeway, and I'd be looking at stuff, and I'd always imagine like who'd be doing it. And then I realized that like the person I'm imagining is me, and that like I was putting my light onto other people. And so then I learned that with painting, like I can just imagine being somebody else and do things that I don't know how to do, and understand things that I don't know how to understand, as long as I can get in the right place mentally to like express that. And so like for me, like art is war. Like I go in the studio and like it's just a huge internal fight with myself and the world. And for the most part, it's a lot about like expressing like internal archetypes from my subconscious, and then using those as like kind of tinder to like start the fire. And then like from there, like the emotion comes out. I get upset at like mark making that I'm making, or things not working out, and then it's just a whole emotional experience. And what my analyst said is that like it was my introduction to the shadow, psychologically speaking, and it was that encounter that really altered the way that I started to pursue art, because it no longer was about like the skill anymore. It was about the symbolic nature of the activity of what I'm doing internally. And so a lot of times like I'm just experimenting and expressing these things, and everything is just kind of like this scattered, like kind of not a mess per se, but it's kind of like an organized chaos. And then out of that kind of like arises kind of like order a little bit as I keep working, and then things just appear on the canvas and compositions just appear. And then if I don't know how to finish it, I imagine someone who can, and I just do it. And you know, that's kind of how I work and like what I do. And so for me, like a big thing is just like getting in the right state of mind. And so that's always the biggest battle, is just waking up and like trying to figure out how to get into the place that I need to be to express what I'm trying to get out. Because a lot of times like I wake up and I have no idea what the fuck to do. And so I'm just like, yo, I gotta figure out how to imagine, you know. And so I use a lot of external stimuli to kind of like trigger things in me to be able to like switch into like different modes of thinking and different ways of being. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. But again, like, you know, I just keep painting, and a lot of times paintings that don't work out end up turning into paintings down the road, because I just cut it up and turn it into collage or turn it into something else, or get it, you know, it's just everything is kind of reused and recycled and like continually like part of the continuum of like psychology, I guess.
Can you share with us, so when we just, you know, came up here for the first time as a group, and we're looking at the space and talking about, you know, how the show is going to come together, you had said that you wanted to do an installation, right? And that's something that, at least in the couple of years I've been here, you have not done before. Can you share where that came from, what inspired that? Or,
Yeah, I've done a few installations in the past. I always ask if anytime there's a show, I'm like, will you let me do an installation? And if they say yes, then cool, I can like create a project. If they say no, I just display paintings. But I always ask to do an installation because I think that there needs to be like context to the work, and so there needs like to be an environment that it's in to like give you a feeling of like where it comes from, you know. And a lot of spiritual practices, they teach you to like really be mindful of like where your food comes from and who picked it out of the ground and like basically all the steps it took to get there. And so like what I wanted to do with the painting is, you know, you see a finished piece and it's like a meal in front of you, but you need to see where it came from, all the stuff and the environment that it's around. And so I always choose to do an installation. I use everything that I can in my studio because that's where it came from, you know. And it's important to me that people see where it comes from and not like that they can project whatever they want onto it. And so I do that like through collage, and like collage to me is a lot about identity because like I felt like I've had a very fractured psyche for a very long time. And so putting these pieces together is like kind of symbolic for me of like putting myself back together. And you know, I really as frustrating as it gets with art sometimes, and like even when I don't have the inspiration to do it, it's like I know that everything that I'm making is still like it's part of the process of getting somewhere for a future me that I haven't met yet, you know?
Cool. One last question. Can you tell us about, so within the installation there's a cross configuration and then there's a knitted form attached to it. Can you tell us?
Yeah, so that was a collaboration with my friend Milagros. She's a spiritual healer. She's an indigenous woman from Mexico. And so she's a friend of my girlfriend's, and like I had met her, and I had gone to Joshua Tree and I was just like out there chilling, and I went to see Noah Purefoy's foundation. It was just like in the area, you know, and then I was like, damn, that's really cool. Like I really like how he puts his sculptures together. And then I was like, oh, I want to make like an assemblage. And so then I kind of like started setting out, like trying to find I had an image, like I guess what I was looking for. I was looking for pieces. I went to downtown LA, and then I was like, man, it's so bad down here. Like I don't want anything from downtown LA. And my friend and I, we ended up down at at the ocean by Trump's Beach. And then I found like pieces of boats and pieces of like wood from the fires up in LA. And I was like, oh, this is really useful. And so we ended up like lugging all this stuff like 3 or 4 miles like back up the hill. And you know, I started like trying to figure out the piece a little bit and starting to kind of put it together. And I'd always wanted to do like a crucifixion piece. Like, you know, every artist has done their crucifixion piece. And so like I wanted to do mine, but I didn't want to do a painting because like everybody's done a painting and like it's whatever. So I wanted to do something like symbolic. And so I was like thinking about like what's going on in the world with like ICE and, you know, the government and all this shit. And I'm like, where I got the materials from, and you know, I was like, okay, well, I want to like ask my friend like what she thinks if like, you know, because of what's going on in the world right now, if, you know, like this is a big transformative precipice that we're all on, you know. And so I was like, oh, I want to make a cocoon, you know, but like I don't know how to knit or like anything like that. And so I was like, I kind of pitched her the idea. I was like, hey, can you do this? And she's like, yeah, I'm sorry for the idea. And then, you know, she did it really like symbolically in a traditional indigenous way, and all the colors are symbolic, and it's filled with like symbolic material that's like represents stuff to her culture. And so it's really just like the dichotomy of like what's going on in the world right now. And even with myself, like psychologically, like I felt like I kind of crucified myself and kind of had to like reanimate, I guess, into something else. And so like that's really where that piece kind of came from. It was like the last year just kind of traveling and then, you know, being inspired and then just going out and looking for the stuff, and everything in the world has just kind of been happening. And so, you know, it's nice to make art that is a reflection of the time period, you know, because this time period won't last forever, and so it'll be good to have stuff, you know, a good reflection of this era, you know.
Very cool.
Thank you.
Mr. Stearns?
A lot of my work is I like when I have something that I really feel pretty strongly about, and I'm a child of the '60s, you know, and we thought we had it all fixed, and obviously we don't. But I have a lot of that idealism, I think, from that period of time still sits within me. And as a kid, I was raised in eastern San Diego County, small town called El Cajon, still pretty kind of small. But I used to wander out to the hills all by myself. Till I was like 6, I didn't have any of my brothers and siblings weren't around yet. So I would take off during the middle of the day or the morning and just wander, and it was one of those kinds of times when you could do that and, you know, be home by dark kind of things. And I came across a lot of native places. There's a lot of Indian reservations and tribal people in San Diego County. And I can remember, I was just thinking about this last night in my dreams, is that when I was thinking about this, I remember walking, and there's, on this one piece of sculpture, you see these little round egg kind of shapes on this piece right here. And those are what they call oak galls. And they're a product of the coastal live oak trees. And they do acorns, and of course they used to make acorns, and they used to grind the acorns. And I came across this area as like a 6-7-year-old kid, and there was this large piece of sheet of granite. There's a lot of large boulder piles in that area. This sheet of granite must have been as big as the floor that we're sitting on right now, kind of a curved piece, and it was under these oak trees were kind of covering over it. And as I was just kind of scruffling around as a 7 or 8-year-old kid, I noticed there were these holes in the granite. And some of them were fairly shallow, and some of them were like this deep. And I realized what that was those are the metates that they ground the acorns in, and they've been grinding acorns there for God knows how many years. And thousands, I would guess, to get, when you put stone on stone, it's going to take a while to get a hole that deep. And it just kind of overwhelmed me, I guess, as I think back about that, I've thought back about that, and the relationship of who we are and what nature is, and how that kind of all ties together with the political buzz and times that we've gone through since forever, forever. We are masters at kind of creating tumult in the world as creatures. And how do we resolve, how do we blend, how do we do exactly what you're talking about, Lauren, is how do we dance in a graceful manner? How do we wrap our arms around one another when the very things that we're making and creating are inviting us not to do that? And that piece that Edith is standing next to is kind of one of the pieces that I'm still working on. The black shape, which is not at all square or rectangular, but kind of has a whole series of planes in it, kind of represents the high technical black box world we're in right now. And the organic forms, tree limbs, coming out of that are what kind of, and the markings on those are tribal markings. They're the colors of the medicine wheel of the native people. It's signs and talks about, to me, this talks to me about how do we integrate and create beauty coming out of this technical creation that's here. And the spiritual side of this, these feelings and these energies that we all have that we either honor or don't honor have been in our heads and our bodies and since our very existence. And how do we take and wrap our arms around those kinds of thought processes? And I don't care if you're an evangelical Christian or a Hindu, or back. We've always had this question, I'm sure in our minds, who am I and where am I from? And why am I here? And how do I survive? And to me, I know that's really kind of heady and mystical and all that kind of stuff. But that's when we really get down to it, that's kind of what I think we sometimes lose sight of. And it's like, if I can get one person to look at the Valkyrie and say, the Valkyrie represents the Nordic angel who is going to take the fallen warrior to Valhalla. If I can get one person to look at that and think about that and say, you know, we're such a violent people, and we honor that in such strange ways sometimes. And the ladder here, too somewhat, by the way. Ladders are really pretty tricky things. I love ladders because we only think about a ladder as getting up to something. But I worked for the phone company for a long time and worked in manholes. And let me tell you, sometimes ladders work from the top down as well. So to me, that ladder says a lot about who we are. The rock represents the earth, the base. It's what we all come from. The wood of the ladder represents a ladder, but it also represents the growth and our dreams and the way we ascend to ourselves. The multicolored yarns that I use on that represent the various peoples that exist in this world. The string that runs up the center, the multicolored string, represents our connection to our Mother Earth. The feathers on top represent the air, where our dreams go, where our wishes go, where our hopes go, and where our prayers go. And how do the prayers get back to us? Down the ladder. So this is what this piece represents to me. So those are kind of the thought processes I have when I do that. The pieces on the wall came out of the pandemic. It was like I could do something with masks, or I could do something kind of grim. But I thought, you know, when I was reading an article where it said we're creating like 3 times, 4 times as much trash as normal because of all the stuff that's going on, and I thought, why don't I see if I can take just all this kind of stuff I find in the street corners and the curbs and just trash boxes and, you know, Amazon boxes, and make something pretty. And that's what those are. Not a real big statement, just see if I can make something pretty. And so that's kind of where my head's at. And I love my dreams. I find a lot there. So and I dream in color. So it's really fun.
Thank you guys. Thank you very much for sharing all that. And Petow, I didn't mind me pushing on that.
I always forget what I did.
So thanks for sharing that. Okay, so our last theme is technology in art. And so Hesh and Lauren talk about their work, and the same thing, if you could talk to us about the pieces that are in the how technology it relates to your practice, how it came to be. Do you work with the camera?
Sure.
Do you work with I don't know.
Lauren, why don't you go first? I think our relationship, we're sort of two sides of the coin where I'm probably a little more reluctant about my technology than you are. So I'd love to hear what you
Start with the
what do you
pros
say?
and the
Yeah,
cons.
go
Okay,
on with
okay.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So my piece is opposite Michael Petow's in the second room. The piece is entitled Recursive Visions. It's a 2-channel video installation and then a series of 36 prints on the wall. And the main idea that I was trying to explore is, this perception between humans and computers, but this idea of perception as an iterative and recursive feedback loop, and what that brings in terms of like abstraction and fragmentation into the process. So the piece kind of starts with a big main screen on the opposite wall. You see a series of 5 different dancers going through a set of gestural motifs that are kind of repeating. There's a high fidelity of the body, but there's also a very kind of surreal, uncanny feeling in terms of the way that the figure is repeating and kind of looping and sometimes collapsing in on itself. And then through a series of abstractions, that original video is broken down further. So the second video screen on the opposite wall shows the same video clip, but it's actually chopped up and kind of abstracted further. And then you go to the prints on the wall, and those are taken from stills of the original video, but they're zoomed in, reorganized, cropped a bit more. And what I was really going for is stretching and playing with a still image of the video to the extent you kind of break it and turn it into something completely new. So I was really looking at stark moments of contrast, taking images of the hand or the face and turning them in ways that made them their own abstract forms in and of themselves. So yeah, I think when you invited me to do the show, I truthfully didn't have anything ready, but I agreed to do the show anyway. But it's an idea that I've always it's a theme that I've always played in with my work, abstraction, and I was speaking to some folks here about this earlier, that some of the AI models and tools that I use, as they get better over time, they have a more realistic fidelity of the body and movement, when in reality I found some of the earlier versions of the technology actually more fruitful as an artist.
Yeah, totally.
So yeah, I think there's this inherent tension with the tools, which is another conversation in itself, but
I think that's the technology conversation to some extent in itself. But can I ask you a question about how much of that process of going from the first to the second to the third, abstracting it and pulling it apart, was completely within your control, and how much of it was sort of a dance with the technology, that maybe there was some unexpected consequences, or how much of it may have been those perfect accidents or any of that stuff? Because to me, that's a lot of what's fascinating me about that use of technology.
Yeah, I think in terms of, that original video with the full screen version of the dancer, that's using a multimodal AI model that takes text in and creates video out. So to your question, there is a little bit of, I throw this over the fence and I see what I get. And then within that video clip, you get the output, you're refining, you may tweak some parameters and get something again. But the series of refining that was more in terms of like the pendulum swinging from artist to machine or computer. As those things are refined, I think like I have more agency as an artist to kind of shape and curate what those things are, with the peak of that being like the 36 frames that you see on the wall.
Those are okay, cool. Yeah, it's fascinating work. I don't know if you're done, but to just riff off of that is that I felt like when I put my work up and then was looking at your work, there was so much to it that, like I said, felt two sides of a coin, where it's so my work is the sort of glitchy photographs here and over there. And sadly, this morning the ballast died in that, but that is a light box that is usually lit up. So it's a backlit Duratrans. And when you put up the screen, the first screen, I was like, oh right, you could make it move. I was like, why didn't I use a screen instead of an old school Duratrans? But I think that that's exactly my current state of an artist. Is in my own life, I've come from, I didn't want to be digital at all. My mother was a graphic designer, and I had a Mac in my house when I was a little kid, and I did the paint program and stuff. And I think that just that little bit of early exposure, later I never did anything digital. I was all analog. I wrote film, I shot film, I did painting, drawing, writing. Writing was my first love, and then photography. And what happened was that after I became a professional photographer, everything went digital. And it was, 5, 6 years in, it was really 8 years in. I got out of school in 2000 with a photo degree and started teaching, and then went into the commercial world. And by 2008, the Canon 1DS had come out, and they've just made every commercial photographer in the world abandon film, basically. And those who hung on went out of business in 2008. It was a whole disaster. And I think I was lucky enough that I had that little bit of exposure early on that I could sort of do it. So I was like, well, fine, this is what's going to happen. I'm going to do it. But I became the lab and all the things that I didn't want to do. And I sat in front of a computer for 10 hours a day, and I hated that. And I was just like, how did this happen? This is not what I wanted. I wanted to work with chemicals and in the darkroom and be, physical. But 20 years later, I'm really have, reluctantly embraced it. And when Sung-Hee asked me about this abstract show, and I said I wasn't sure how much of an abstract artist I was, but then I, realized that I had this vision in my head for years about this accident I had where I uploaded some photographs and they got corrupted and they glitched out. And I remember this one picture there of Eliza walking on, very mundane sort of snapshot that became something completely different, headless, ghost image that was just, fascinating to me. And that was completely by mistake. Mm-hmm. And so when Sung-Hee invited me, I thought, well, there's something that I love that's abstract, and it's sort of, to your thing, it's like you start with a piece and it becomes something different by pulling out of it. And that was completely by accident, but for the show, I decided to do it on purpose. And so I taught myself some Python, which, nowadays you can do that. You just go to ChatGPT and tell me, how did you do Python? Blah, blah, blah. And you get a code, and then you drop a photograph into it, and it glitches. And then you go into the code, and you can tell it, oh, I want to glitch more vertical, I want to glitch more horizontal, I can do, and you just keep doing it. But it's almost entirely a trial and error thing. You don't really have, other than some parameters about the size of the glitch and the verticality or horizontalness of it, you sort of just, until you get something. And then what's really interesting to me is the sort of more mundane the photograph, the sort of more interesting the output in some ways. So I'd take photographs I was really proud of and put them in, and I was like, that's terrible. Take something that I didn't really like that much or whatever, very simple, throw it in, and it starts to, and so it becomes that dance with the machine where, some of it's out of my control and some of it's in. And that got me really excited because I feel like that's mostly what I'm doing with my photography now and with the dance of digital and AI, is that I'm looking for those mistakes that you used to have with film, where if you ran it through maybe a beat up camera with a hole in it or some light leaks, or you cross-processed it, or you did something in the darkroom that was a little sloppy or messy, or you toned it different, or you did something, you get these things that you weren't quite prepared for, and it was all about mistakes. And so I'm trying to find that in digital, because digital's to me, it's the problem now is that it's all so perfect and so easy, and it's really devaluing it. Everybody can take a pretty well exposed, well-made picture with no thinking in their pocket. You know what I mean? And so now it's sort of coming around to how do we make machines that want to do things perfect sort of have mistakes, and then thematically this whole work is about unintended consequences and political things statements, and I chose images and wrote the statement's all about how societally we're probably making some really drastic mistakes right now, and we don't necessarily know what they are, but they're happening.
Yeah. Well, I remember you talking about those, I remember just in passing conversations, you talking about wanting to do work that was, I don't know, not necessarily more abstract, but like outside of your normal commercial routine that you were in, but you wanted to expand back out into more fine art work. And I think we talked some about abstraction. And
Yeah.
That's why, I thought
I think so.
it'd be cool to have. Yeah, how would that be interpreted, or what would come out of that from a photographer or photographic stance? It's interesting you say, when you started talking and you're focused on the digital aspect of photography, but to me, photography is technology. Like, even the analog photography to me is mediated by, it's machine, the mechanical thing that's mediating what's produced. But it's all different levels, and then you talk about AI, and that's the next level. But before that, printmaking, before, right. So, and so what you call mediation or interference depends on the time you live in, what you're working in. But yeah, I'm like, cameras, I'm so glad that these phones can just take our pictures, because I took photography classes, and I could never figure out f-stops, and I don't know, just my brain would not accept it. Wanted to ask both of you, this is kind of just like behind the scenes kind of questions, but like Hesh, for the images that you're showing, especially on this wall, how did you decide which pieces to show? And you say like, oh, you took like an image that you really liked, and you plopped it in, and you were like, forget it.
Well, I think I answered that with two different. One was just figuring out the process, and like I found that if I dumped in pictures that were really already good, maybe it was just my own reaction to seeing them glitched. Whatever, I was just playing with that process. Then when I really sat down to come up with originally 3 or 4, now 5 or 6 of this series, I'm coming from sort of the commercial world, like in storytelling in general, and shooting campaigns, and you have to have sort of parameters. I'm big on, I can't work outside of the world's too big, so I have to give myself little boxes to put things in. And so the word corruption and the word sort of glitch and mistake and all these things were in my head. So I sat down to think about the current societal problems and things that I see that are specifically accident prone or may have long-reaching ramifications. So the first piece is future trash, and it's basically the port and all the massive amounts of stuff that we all import, export, throw away, make, consume. Capitalism in a small, little, tiny corner of the picture. The second one is SpaceX, and with everything that's going on, specifically with Elon Musk, but also just about commercializing space and the exploration of the stars, and now, we're reliant on, 80-90% at the latest count of, you probably know better than me, Rodney, but like the 80% of our government satellites are now owned by a private company. These are just not probably good things that are, mistake-proof future plans. So that's that one. The third one over is the influencer at a well-known Malibu beach, just shooting herself and her friends and doing and it made me start thinking about the attention economy and how that's just a bad, not necessarily in day-to-day use, but just the future of it is unintended consequences of everyone wanting your attention all the fucking time, and that's essentially an economy. It's how we're paid, and everyone wants to be famous already, and then there's just this attention economy thing, and everything's playing with your attention. And the last one is from the Gay Pride Parade in New York City, and it was a Chinese delegation of Gay Pride marchers. And at the time, I was sort of thinking a lot about the blame China, the China flu, the everything. And my mother was gay, and growing up just with a certain amount of scapegoating and blame in society about all the problems. You know, I can never be a real man because I was raised by lesbians. Like all these different things about the sort of the way we like to point out the other and blame things. So that's the last one, is sort of scapegoating and blame. Anyway, to go into all of those.
So glad I had no idea. That's so cool to find out. And then Lauren, I wanted to ask about your work too. Like, how do you decide, or how did you decide on the imagery, on the movements? What is it? Is it, what is your interest, or what is it? Okay.
Yeah.
I think that's what are you doing?
Yeah, I mean, it's great to hear you say kind of like, the way you're working around this idea of happy accidents, because that's this story of kind of how that imagery came up first was very much by accident.
Mm-hmm.
I was working with these AI models, bringing in some of my previous artworks and video works, which had just used like classic digital glitch techniques or whatnot, and I was trying to get a prompt and images that would be indicative of my style as an artist. And then I was feeding that information back in and describing new scenes. So through that process of trying to have a AI interpretation of my aesthetic, and then for it to bring things back to me, I was really exploring like new videos that it was providing as output. And this one video was completely on accident, which is one of the clips that you see in there. And I just loved, in my choreography work and other work, I deal a lot with gestural motifs and this idea of repetition. And it was such a great video that encapsulated all of that. And I then started to, in some of these programs, you can riff or remix a specific video segment. So I started to spawn off different video clips from that original video. And that's what then became the series of 5 different dancers that you see on the video. And then I think too, at the time that I was working with that video, I also moved into this space, and the majority of people working here are more kind of like representational art or other abstract artists, more like in the analog category. And I was very inspired by everyone's work, and it made me really want to take my things off the screen. So I really wanted to explore with how can this digital work become print or become analog in some way. So that's where I started playing with, cropping different stills and rearranging them to kind of create their own compositions. So yeah.
Cool. Do you guys think that you will continue with these series, or how?
Yeah, my series will definitely be continuing. Yeah, I'm not done with this.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope both of you keep continuing.
I'd like to jump in.
Of course.
I just love hearing other artists talk about their art. And I've been living with this show for a while, but listening to the artists talk about their art in ways I haven't heard them talk about it before helps me see it differently. And in particular, you talking about your photography. One of the most beautiful things about art is it helps you see the world in a new way. It brings new perspective. And it's interesting to hear you talking about the photography and the glitches that you wanted to put into the art. Well, you also talked about how there's glitches out there in the world. The world we live in right now is full of glitches, if you will. The world's upside down, right? I don't care where you are on the political spectrum, the world's nuts. And if someone doesn't invite you to look at the world differently. You're going to keep looking at it the way you always do. You're going to see the same pictures. You're going to see the same photographs in the media, in print, or whatever. And this is starting to remind me a little bit about Impressionism and how Impressionism came out of photography. So photography showed you the world the way it was. So the Impressionists had to show you their impression of it to just get you to look at reality a little bit differently. So now I'm looking at Hesh's photography over here and I'm saying, yeah, the world is glitchy. Our institutions aren't functioning the way they're supposed to. Our leaders aren't behaving the way we want them to. We as a society aren't doing what we would like to see us do. So I'm holding up some art for you to kind of reflect. That's what I'm getting out of this. And this is what art's supposed to do. Yeah, I don't know if I'm just making what's already obvious to you, obvious to me. But I'm loving it.
And my mother used to always say,
Yes.
state the obvious,
Yeah.
clear the air.
Yeah.
It's important to do that now and then.
I mean, things come to me a little later than other people. Maybe I'm extending it.
Or you were a child, you know.
Yeah.
I think our great curator here was going to bring up something about
Right.
Well,
art
actually,
and
that
politics. or
was the
political-
Yeah.
perfect
It's a good
segue
segue.
that, the
I get it.
Yeah, no, but you're absolutely right, Mark, and that's part of what I love about artist talks, is that especially these days, we're all moving like 100 miles an hour, doing, we're always all thinking about like 6 to 20 different things, or things that we have to work on, take care of, whatever, pay or whatever. So, I mean, to be able to gather in a space, seated, and one person talking at a time that's a very special thing. And to be able to share with others the inner workings of what drives us to do what we do, that's a very special thing. And yes, to be able to share the art and share your thoughts and feelings about it, hopefully we have this exchange, right? And now we can affect each other, and I never thought of it this way. I never saw that piece that way. I had to ask that question because I knew what the containers were, but I'm like, what are the other things? And wow, I'm so glad to hear it and everything that everyone said. In terms of, this is a big loaded question. I'm not even sure how to ask it, but like the relationship of like art and artists in society. Like, yes, this is the most messed up time I've ever lived in my lifetime. So conflicted, so, I can't even, it's just unfathomable that things that are happening right now. Our president just won some sort of peace prize? Somebody gave him a peace prize? How? It just doesn't make any sense to me. So, I don't know.
Are you asking?
I don't even know what to ask. What do you guys think?
I'll just respond to the fact that I personally, and this is no judgment on anybody else, but I personally believe it is like paramount that artists comment on society and the world around us. I think that if you're not engaging with the sort of societal discourse as an artist, you're doing nothing against decorative craft work, but like basically that's where the line is. It's like, if you're putting things on the wall to be purchased for beauty and beauty's sake alone, or you're commenting on a bigger concept and society and themes, and that's just my own sort of outlook on it. And I've had this argument, being a professor in college, you have these discussions about what is art and what is, the artist's job, and where's the line between craft and art and all these big concepts. But I think to me it definitely distills down to, aesthetic art or conceptual art, and I've always sort of fallen on the side of conceptual art because you should be commenting on concepts and discussing societal issues, and you look at Dada to surrealism to abstract expressions. It's always in reaction or at least on comment of something of the times. So to me, I think it's vital. So to just answer the clearest part is like, yes, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, going off what you're saying, I think all art is, whether intended to or not, reflects the times, whether it's music, whether it's movies, whether it's TV, whether it's art. I think, say for example, how you're saying, like, things can be very like aesthetically pleasing, inadvertently, like the world's upside down, like you said. Maybe people are painting things that are just aesthetically pleasing to contrast that. Like, things are so messed up, I want to paint something pretty. Or in the same regard, like, things are so messed up, I need to acknowledge that. Something needs to be said about it. I feel like whether people intend to or not, whether it's inadvertent, like, all art is reflective of the times. Whether it's like, oh, this person used this paint because it was cheap. Why was it cheap? Oh, because the economy was kind of at this point, Or like, they used this, or there's a surplus of there was a sale, things like that. Everything reflects everything. So I feel like, just going off what you were saying, like, all art is reflective of the times, whether they like intend to or not.
Well, I mean, the anthropologist in us would say, like, you can't separate the artist from the art anyway, so they're a product of their life and their times and all that, but, I think that there's a conscious part of it too, whether you choose to embrace it or...
I think we have an obligation, kind of. We're supposed to see things differently. Musicians hear things differently. Looking through a lens or looking at a screen and how that affects, I think, how we see things, and how it comes out on the screen affects things differently. I couldn't, where I am in my life and in my age, et cetera, I'm not of the computer generation, not even close. So for me to think about ways to use that tool, I have to use another tool. But it's amazing to me to see the things that come out of the world today in the art world, and the creativity that exists, and sometimes the overt, because I like doing political work, I really do, as you guys know. I mean, I like, I like that, and I think causing people uncomfortableness. When I think back about some of the big changes in art, Impressionism, when you went to abstract, how uncomfortable that made people. And you think, how does art make people uncomfortable? But it does. And I think that's part of what our job is because we hear things differently as musicians, because as writers, we think of words that Edith and I were having this conversation earlier, is like, where did that word come from? It's like, how did the vocabulary some of us have is just incredible, and yet somebody as simple as like Hemingway, who's, it just uses the same words, and then the work is just as powerful. So I think we have an obligation, that's the gift we were given by whatever, whoever, whenever, but that's the gift we have, and I think we're lucky enough, sitting here, you out there, you're lucky enough to either be a participant or an enjoyer of what we have, whether you look at it as being good, bad, or indifferent. We have the ability to try to take the time to say what works from somewhere deep down inside us, to create something that we want to go, hey, just look. And if it changes one person's mind, we win. We've helped some way to broaden their view, and that's what you were saying. Is that, people see things differently, but the fact that they're looking at it creates an opening. Their mind is opening a little bit, and I think I can't ask for any more than that as a creator. And thank you, by the way, for doing that.
Yeah, let's just all thank Sung-Hee for being
Rodney?
Well, Sung-Hee, you haven't talked about your art.
It's true.
So,
Yes, my work.
We can't quit until you do.
Right, sure, okay.
Thank you, Rodney.
Well, the work that I'm showing here is, this is my mandala series. It started with, the paintings are mandala series, and then the squares just kept going and manifested in the sculptural piece. Started with the larger piece in the center. I did about 5 years ago. But it was like a one-off. I love so much of art. Like there's so many artists that I so greatly admire. But I really loved Frank Stella's minimalist period in the 60s and 70s. And during lockdown, I had a book of his work and I was flipping through it. I'm like, oh, I really like that. And you know, during lockdown, anything goes, right? So I'm like, I feel like painting this painting. So I did it, and like I said, I thought it was a one-off, but, and this is kind of going back to the beginning about process and state of mind and state of body. I found the act of making the painting became like its own enjoyable thing. That because it was so, you know, the form is simple. It's a simple pattern of repeating squares, right? And I don't think I taped, I'm not sure. I may have taped it, I may not have. I think I tried not to tape it. I wanted it to be exact, but not totally exact, and I wanted you to be able to see my hand in it, right? But like finding that balance of where you see the hand, but it doesn't look effed up, you know? So that took a certain amount of attention and focus, and hours of painting, but I found that really enjoyable, and the sum of those actions outputted more than what you see before you. So I continued on with it, and I realized like, oh, it's transmuted and transformed into my own thing. Like it's a mandala series. Mandala is kind of a spiritual manifestation, right? Revolving around ritual. So the ritual is painting, right? And then working with this theme of the repeating squares. And for me, it's about color, about relationship of color, space, movement, like these, just very the esoteric aspects of art making, but then juxtaposed with this sense of order and geometry and calm, right? These things that are opposite of each other, but when they're balanced, create a harmony. So that's what the series is about for me. And then this piece that's hanging in the center is also another ongoing series that where I've worked with the image on this side here. This is also a photograph that I took about 6 or 7 years ago. It's of myself with a mask and wig, and that image is called Anima Persona. So dealing with anima is our inner identity, and persona is our what we project out into the world, right? So that a duality of when I'm standing before you as a curator speaking to a group, who am I versus who am I, in private and on a personal level, and we all have different manifestations of that, right? And it's intentionally exaggerated, right? It's a gold face, but the gold is splotchy and bumpy, and there's some commentary about the times we live in. I think things like color, disposable materials, fluorescent colors, to me these are not like things that have been in my my practice historically, but I feel, to me, they resonate with the times that we live in. Like, we live in a hyper, everything is ultra and hyper, hyper colored. Everything is shiny. Everything's going like 100 times faster than it used to. So that is part of the exact, part of what that's about. This form is meant to be a double pyramid. Kind of going back to some of the mystical or unknown metaphysical type things that I'm interested in. But yeah, these are the works.
And then,
Can I ask you a question?
yeah, me too.
Pardon?
Backside.
Backside? Backside, yes, sorry, thank you. So this, again, this is the latest iteration of anima persona. So anima persona is about the individual, the inner, outer individual. This piece is called, what is it called? Et ego et alter. So Latin, that is both myself and the other. And that is about the times we're in, and what does that mean? It's about the individual and the other. Who is the other? Are we friendly? Are we antagonistic? How do you decide that? Right? How does that happen? How do you decide? How does that come to be? This is the back of a person's head. It meant to be anyone's head. Be anyone. The other is anyone and everyone. But how do you decide? How does that decision get made, whether we are friendly or in conflict with each other? So that is the question. All right. This has been amazing. Does anyone have any questions for any of the artists?
Yep.
Yes?
Oh, for you,
Yes.
it's not really, I had cataract surgery a couple of years ago.
Uh-huh.
And as a child, I was born with a crossed eye, and so I'm all for people getting cataract surgery. Everybody goes, you go in and come out, and the colors are just amazing. But I've got double vision, and I've learned to work because I have the crossed eye. I've learned to work with double vision, and I'm sitting here, and if I'm not really concentrating, I'm going, there's like 2 of those squares. You know?
Oh, wow.
When the sun comes out of LAX or something.
An added bonus,
That is cool.
Well, yeah, and it's good, and I've pretty much learned, like if I'm driving home from my kid's house in San Diego and I see a car with the same license plates, I just cover one eye, you know? It's amazing how your brain just adapts to things like that. And every plane that comes out of LA, I know it's got 2, okay, then I go, the plane's going exactly the same speed with the same stroke.
You have your own special effects.
Well, and also the brains are just amazing.
Anyway, that one brain just sitting here.
Oh, is it reverse?
That's cool.
Is it like pulsating at
People in
you?
front of it aren't doing that. It's really, I'm seeing 2 of everybody.
Sung-Hee, that's kind of relates to the question I was going to ask you, which was, I didn't realize you did this originally during the pandemic. Obviously, we've talked about this work, and I've seen it for a while now, but the fact that you did it during the pandemic, and you said it was sort of like the first time you worked with very ordered, sort of, geometric things, and it was like, my question is, was it a sort of searching for, or did you find any comfort in creating something so orderly during what was clearly like a chaotic time of uncertainty?
Oh, maybe that was subconsciously. Maybe that was part of it,
Yeah.
right?
Was it comforting or no?
Yeah. I mean, it was. And it was a slow seep. Like, I didn't realize it while I was doing that one, I was like, why am I doing this? This is really tedious. that this is taking a lot longer. Like
Sure.
each color would take like, I mean the smaller ones obviously not as long, but each color, especially on the outer wings, for some reason they took days. Like going back, and it's so simple, right? Just like solid color. But I'd wake up the next day like, oh, that's wrong. I have to go back to it. Yeah, maybe it was like doing something like, yeah, that.
I know what you mean, because I
Right.
don't think about
Yeah. Anyone else? Any comments, questions? Yeah? Okay. Well, thank you all. Yeah, there's lots of food. We have sandwiches, there's cold pizza, cakes, cookies.
Okay.
And they all
Oh, okay. I appreciate it.
That was my